Okay, so welcome to A Sage Named Simone. This week we are doing our podcast episode. I think we're on episode 4. I'm gonna have to double check, but we're doing it on video. And so I might continue to do this because I also like kind of getting into the vibe. But you know me, I like to jump right in. What are we talking about today? So I took a lot of notes. So I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm going to be looking down because I was really excited when I was writing about this, because a lot of the things that I'm writing about, a lot of the things that I'm sharing are things I'm moving through right now. So it's almost like getting to have a conversation with somebody in the midst of the passion, because you're not just reflecting on experiences you had, you're like telling them what you're experiencing now. And it's so much more beautiful than you could have even imagined. So, when I sat down to think about like what I wanted to do this week, because last week I took a whole week of rest. And so the inner wild woman has been coming up a lot. And so I was tasked from my compassionate self-mastery coach to like have a conversation with my wild woman. What is she saying? And all the different conversations, we love synchronicities here. So all the different conversations were asking me questions about who I was at the core and what freedom looked like to me. From a range of things, like how I want to live, how I want to work, how I want to do relationships, my sexuality, all of the things. It was making me go to a lot of uncomfortable places and asking myself a lot of questions that I'm like, I thought I knew the answer, And so in this season where life is shifting so drastically, it makes sense that questions are coming up that I'm like, I don't know, like, let me rethink this. And so I love this introduction that the Wild Woman is making into my life right now. And so I want to share some of the things that are coming up around it. And so one of the books that I have read, I kept seeing it everywhere. And so I'm going to plug that into here now. It's an older book. It is Woman Who Runs with Wolves. And I listened to it on Audible. And I think it was only 2 hours. So go listen to it. And I loved it for a lot of different reasons. But it was almost like the book came out before we were in this, I think in the era we're in now, a lot more people are embracing naturally who they are. But, it compared like the maiden versus like the woman who goes and gets married and has all these kids and things like that. And so I think now we're pushing the needle even more on what it means to be the woman you desire to be and to be free and what that looks like. So I called this one, When She Speaks, She Howls, Embracing the Inner Wild Woman. And so I think for me, it's really just getting in touch with my voice. Like, what do I have to say? What do I want to represent? Who am I? And so getting in touch with my voice has been the best way for me to connect to this inner wild woman. And so I think one of the things from this book that was so captivating was this comparison to women and wolves. Bone by bone and hair by hair, through night dreams, through half understood and half remembered, the wild woman comes back, and she comes back through stories. And so that was a major point that I want to bring up, just based on what I'm witnessing in my life, of how the wild woman is inserting herself through my dreams, through my desires, through me sharing with other people, me writing, me doing these videos, a podcast. Like, I'm watching that happen in my life. So there was a story she told of a woman being born from the wolf's bones. And so the story shows that the animal is within the woman. And then she talks about the desert. So that's the location of where she finds the bones. And the desert represents this place where we all start. We start as a bundle of bones lost somewhere in the desert. And you cannot put yourself together again until you have all the parts. And so she goes on to say all the reasons we do the things that we do for self-exploration. So we go to therapy, we create, we write, we do tarot cards, we go on journeys, we just try to discover different parts of ourselves and all those things. And the reason is we're trying to get all of our skeletal parts so that they can sing over them. And so for the singing, because I don't even know if I'm telling this in the right order, but you get the point. You will get the point, I promise. So what she says is, singing is the voice of the spirit, And the old woman, known as the one who knows, she sings over the bones. And as she sings over the bones, they become fleshed out, and she sings over them. And as we pour soul over the bones of what we used to be, it revilifies us. It brings everything back into our memories of what we were and what we can be today. And that is really where I'm at. And so it was kind of befitting that this book popped up in that time, because that is where I'm at. It's like, you know, I am, you know, I'm putting life into this new version of myself, or this old version that I'm reconnecting to. And it feels like someone is singing over me. Like pieces of myself are like in harmony, coming back together to meet themselves. And, you know, it sounds kind of like woo woo. It sounds kind of like, okay, like a little whimsical, and maybe I am, but it feels like there's pieces, like if I visualized it, it's almost like there are little pieces of my soul just floating in the air, and everything is kind of lifting up in unison, entering back into my body. And I'm like, not meditating. What's the word? Shoot, I can't think of it. But when you're like rising off the ground, and it's like all just like, like, like coming back into your body. So like I'm returning back into my body. So for me, what I reflected on a lot was how we focus, like in our creativity, we focus on like how many people we can reach, like how many people can we free. And so when we get on these journeys and we want to help as many people as possible, especially when you start to move in spaces of service, you move towards the community, you know, you experience this new sense of freedom, and you want to free everybody else. And so I was thinking, like, what if we turned it around and we focused on how many times we could free ourselves? And, you know, because I'm thinking about the messages of the inner wild woman, like, what is she here to show me? Like, what is she here to tell me? And it's like, how many times can you free yourself? And so I know, like, for me, in the space of where I'm trying to be more creative and I'm trying to share more, there's this idea of like, if I put it out there, will people watch it? You know, when I do put it out there, people don't like it. People don't say things. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But like not putting my value based on people's responses. And it's a hard thing to do, especially when you're doing something new and you're like, is it good? Is it okay? You know, but what I'm witnessing is that in being open, in freeing my space enough, freeing my mind enough to release these things that are being birthed within me, my life is shifting drastically. Like things unrelated, doors unrelated to the thing that I'm being creative about, it's opening up opportunities. And they're not related, but there's something within me, there's an energy within me that is shifting, that maybe it's part of it is self-worth, maybe it's seeing yourself in the life that you desire, and things just start to shift. But so going back to because I have notes, so we're following the notes. And so like, what if we turned it and focused on how many times we could free ourselves? And so you look at it like the next stage, the next step. Can I free myself here? Can I do it here? Or, you know, the next level. And not in an ego sense, or like, you know, I just want to climb this ladder, or I want to be better than everybody else. Not in a comparison way of better than everybody else, and not even better than yourself. Just how much further can you go beyond the person you don't want to be? Because that's really what it comes down to. Do you like where you are? Do you want to continue to be where you are? What life do you desire to have? And can you free yourself again? And so if we look at even like anything we write, anything we do, when you breathe life into it, when you release it, when you let it go, have I freed myself a little bit more? You know, when a new challenge comes in, when a new choice comes up, am I choosing to shrink? Am I choosing to diminish my choices, my ability to move, my ability to have freedom? Or am I choosing the thing that might be a little harder, but it is what I desire? So am I choosing the freedom? Am I choosing the limiting belief? And so, you know, and I think it's really about the spirit, like at a soul level, peeling back the layers, doing the shadow work. And we talk about shadow work all the time, but it's real, like going into the dark places of yourself and the dark thoughts and why they're there and what they're really here to show you, and walking with them hand in hand and unearthing and reframing a lot of the ways you see yourself, especially the negative aspects of ourselves that we look at, understanding where they come from. Is that a fear that was ingrained in me? Is that a fear that was conditioned in me? Is that even a part of me, or is that something somebody else told me about me? And so doing work differently, doing relationships differently, doing life differently, all of those things, like that is what a lot of the shadow work does, is it peels back the layers so that you can understand what's really you at a soul level, at a spirit level. What is you? And I think that is what the Wild Woman is about, is getting back to the bones, like what is innately natural for you. And so how many times can you sit aside the old ways of being, these limiting thoughts and beliefs, in order to move forward before the pain, before the doubt, before the fear, and then reconnect to that inner child? See things with a childlike eye, that wonder, that desire, that hope. And I know this all just sounds so like optimistic, and I promise I am not almost always optimistic, but what I do believe is, like, as we shift, you know, I wanted to try a little glasses, but as we shift, our energy shifts in a sense of, we see things as opportunity again to like free ourselves again, instead of like, this is happening to me again. What I've watched myself do is like, this is an opportunity. This is not a problem. This is a question, you know? And what is my answer? And with the things that I desire right now, I know that I am being pulled in through my heart space to freedom. And so really the question keeps coming back to, what does freedom look like to me? What do you value? And so when you start to look from that aspect, when you start to see things from a different angle, to see success differently, like how am I a successful person, is based on your value systems. And so my journey isn't about the masses at that point. It's about me. I have to center my universe. I loved when we talked about that in class, when I was in my spiritual herbalism classes. You are the center of your universe. And in that space of being the center of your universe, you get closer to your purpose. And when you get closer to your purpose, that is how we show up more purposefully in community. You know, when you are in a space of service, you cannot serve if you can't show up as yourself. If you can't show up in the role, or in the space, in the person, in the body that you were created to be and created to use, and with the voice that you were given, then how can I really show up effectively in the community that I was meant to serve? So the sun is doing things right now, but I think y'all can still see me. Y'all can see me. Okay. So yeah, I just started reframing the way that I would see it, because I'm starting to see how much, like, when you get into a space where you're trying to free yourself, I'm realizing how in freeing myself, I'm opening myself up. And so when you open yourself up, you're opening yourself up to a lot of things and a lot of people, a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas. And all of them are not yours. All of them are not your desires either. And all of them you don't even want to engage in. And so when I'm open, I'm like, yeah, like, tell me more. Or I'm like, yeah, well, let me see. I'm like, well, I don't know. But I think there's value in finding grounding in a lot of these spaces, and asking myself, you know, I think as the Wild Woman, you expect to be this free spirit who just wants to do everything, be everywhere, go everywhere, do everything. But really, for me, it's the freedom of choice. That's what the Wild Woman represents for me, is that now I have the choice to be and do whatever it is that I want to be. It's not that I can do everything. It's not that I want to do everything. It's that I have the choice. And so I'm watching myself continually give my choice over to other people when they project their opinions, their ideas, their projections for my life onto me, and it may not sit well with me. And so now I'm in this space of contemplation. I'm confused. I'm going back and forth, like, should I not? Do I know what I really want? And it's like, yeah, you actually did, but you're too open. You're too open. And so there's a difference between being open-minded and living with open energy fields. And I think my energy fields stay open a lot too much. Like, I have to learn how to close that down. That's you and that's me. And so going back to that centering my universe, that's another way of looking at that, Instead of, I know anytime you talk about you the center of your universe, people are going to assume like, oh, self-centered, she doesn't care about anybody else. But it's that I care about other people so much that I have to know where I start and other people begin. I have to know where we connect. I have to know where we align. I have to understand why there was a me in the first place. You know what I mean? Because if there were no differences between us, if there were no, where there was no uniqueness, there would be nobody. And so why me? Why me in this position, in this spot, at this time? And sometimes you have to go into those silent spaces to shut out those external voices so that you can answer the questions for yourself. Because I'm getting into a space now where, I've done the quiet contemplation. I've went out and I've socialized, and then I've come back to the quiet contemplation, and I've come back with more questions that aren't mine. And so that is part of the kind of, I kept getting messages about protecting your heart, protecting your home, protecting your energy fields, protecting all these things. And I'm like, oh, you think danger, like, external things are trying to influence you. But some of it is like in your internal spaces where is your, and they use this term a lot in spirituality, it's like energy leakages. And I didn't really get it, but now that I'm talking about it right now, I get it now. There are places where you are way more open than you should be, way more receptive to outside thoughts, views, and opinions, and they become your own. And so even in this space where you're trying to recondition your mind and unlearn some of the things that didn't work for you, there's more information that's pouring into you at that time. And so you're still doing that work in the midst of already doing that work, if that makes sense. And so I think that's something that I have to remember as I'm moving through this space, is that I'm still saying no to things as I'm saying yes to life. As I'm saying yes to the things I desire, I'm still saying no to the new things that are popping up that I don't. So yeah, I'm going to continue with my notes because that's not in the notes. So yeah, being about like showing up better in my purpose by being the center of the universe. So I was like, so in creation and everything I write and everything I do, if I desire freedom, I should ask myself if I'm freeing myself when I do this. If you don't have the desire to be free, this conversation isn't even for you. But if there's something in you that is awakening, that wants to connect to, I hate that this thing is like right at my legs because I'm trying to like duck under it. But if that's awakening within you and there's a desire to be free, then we have to be accountable for where we're showing up authentically. And so when I write and, I'm like, oh, nobody reacted to it. Nobody had a response. Like, what's wrong with it? All those things. My only concern now needs to be, did you show up authentically? Because if you didn't show up authentically, you're not living free. You're not living as yourself. And so creating solely for reaction is not freedom. It is restriction. It is limitation, because now you're creating for, 444. You're creating for a response. You're creating for a reaction. You're working for something. You're not freeing something. You're not creating for the sake of creating. You're creating for a response. And and that creates a restriction for yourself, because it's no longer what do I want to share, it's what will people react to. And so when I think about creativity, it is our ability to move beyond what we've seen, what we know, and to move into a space of what we desire and what we can see. And so that is one of the major messages for me of the Wild Woman, is that moving beyond a space of what is to move into a space of what could be, and what exists if you just allow it. So yeah, the only response that matters is yours. So the question then becomes, how do you respond to your own work? Did you feel anything? And so that's how I look at a lot of things, is, did I feel anything? And if I don't feel anything from what I wrote, from what I shared, from what I put out, from what I released from within, then I know I'm not done releasing. I know I wasn't being honest. I know I was limiting myself. And so you go back to the drawing table and you try again. I think about therapy. Sometimes I go to therapy and I put it all on the table or I feel like I put it all on the table, and we get to the end of the therapy session, and the last 10 minutes, it's like rapid fire. And we really get to what the issue was. We really get to the gravity of what I was actually trying to convey in that whole session. And so sometimes when you create, you're just kind of, you're going through the things, you're pulling things out. It may not actually be what you want to put out in that way, but you've got to sift through the things. And so for me, I'm learning to sift through the things, and then, you know, if it is something I feel, because some things you create just for yourself. Some things you create, you want to share with other people. And so I'm in a season where I'm being asked to create and share it. And so sometimes I have to sift through, because sometimes it'd be BS. It'd be like, okay, you're not really trying to get down to the nitty gritty. You're not trying to be honest, but I got to get there. Like, I give myself time to move there. Sometimes I can't just jump in and this is what I'm feeling. This is what I need. This is what I think. Sometimes I got to process before I'm ready to like give it all out. So, yeah. And so one of the things that I wrote down that I wanted to keep with myself is the only person I am trying to change and transform is me. And my only goal with other people is to show them that it is possible if it is the life that they desire. And so I definitely had to learn that. I can't determine what life people desire, and I can only control myself. I can only control how I show up for me. And yeah, like, if people desire that life, I hope to be a walking embodiment of the freedom journey, you know, of release and rebirth over and over and over again. You know, I would love to mirror things that can shift. You know, I want people to believe that change can happen, that they can transform, that things can change, like, and you can love your life. You can find that community. Things can get better. Fulfillment exists in the smallest spaces, in the largest spaces, that we don't have to keep limiting ourselves and our lives based on the things that we've seen and the things that we've known and the things that we've grown comfortable with, but we don't connect to. And so that's where I've been at lately, is like, in awe of how many times and how many spaces that I've had to free myself over and over again, because in this last year and a half, especially in these last 6 months of like, here's another spot, let's free ourselves. Here's another spot, let's free ourselves. And yes, this can be tiring and draining. Like I said, last week, I rested. And so I listen to spirit. I listen when it's like, okay, we need to rest. We've been doing a lot of work. We've been doing a lot of emotional heavy lifting, because it's not always going to be the physical work. Sometimes it's the emotional heavy lifting that's like, you need to take a break. And so I do. I listen to mindless music. I watch mindless TV shows. Sometimes I sit in silence. But give yourself a break even when you're doing the emotional lifting, because you'll need it. But yeah, all of those things that you desire are there, and that passion and that fire within you can be rebirthed. It can come back. It can come alive. It doesn't matter what's happened. It can return to you, because those are pieces of you. And so you can recover pieces of your soul. I learned one of the concepts in my spiritual herbalism class is soul loss. And that one resonated with me deeply, because I just imagine, like I said, different pieces of my soul that had kind of like stumbled away through different parts of my life by just me self-abandoning, and not intentionally. It's just the way we've been conditioned to live. You know, it's not necessarily about following your heart. It's not about connecting to the deeper parts of yourself. It's just kind of going with the flow. What is the path that's set out for a typical society? You know, it really is this place of, when you think about your life, bringing in creativity to your everyday routine starts to shift your life, and it starts to create a different life for you. And so that is what I'm witnessing happening in my life, is that this creativity that I'm doing right now is amazing. It's fun. I love it, but it's creating a new life for me. And yeah, and so I will leave it with a quote that came to me in my meditation, of thinking of this wild woman and like, what is she trying to tell me? And it was like, your dreams were never just dreams. They were prophecy, and you will fulfill them. And that's all I got today. Thank you for listening and watching, and I hope you do all the things you're supposed to do if you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify, podcasts, whatever you watch from. Let me know what you think. I want some feedback. Like, talk to me.